Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
The other day, I took you through the Edelman Canada survey that showed that half of Canadians don't trust the media. In fact, half think the media positively lies. That's incredible. It's one thing to say, I think the media is biased, or I think they only present one side of the story, but to say, no, they actually positively lie. They deceive us on purpose. That's incredible, and half of Canadians think that. I think it's true. I mean, do you think the media tells the truth about Justin Trudeau? We know they don't. Here's one of a million examples. Remember when Time magazine, which as you know is an American magazine, remember when they broke the news in the last Canadian election that Justin Trudeau had a long-standing fetish of dressing up in blackface? Sounds like a pretty amazing scoop, right? Weird that it came from an American magazine during the Canadian election, right? But in fact, within hours after Time magazine published, other Canadian media released their own photos and even videos of Trudeau in blackface that they obviously didn't just search for from scratch that night. They had been sitting on their own photos and videos of Trudeau in blackface for months, for years, who knows? And they had no plans to publish them. They were sitting on what were objectively, obviously, demonstrably news. And they deceived the public, all of them together, by hiding them, by covering them up for their boy, Justin Trudeau. In fact, even more telling was the hunt for the man, private citizen, who dared to leak the photos to Time magazine. How dare he? Who was he? What's his angle? Why did he break the pact of silence? I'm serious. The media assigned more reporters and did more digging on who he was than they did on Trudeau himself. They had the Trudeau dirt, they just refused to publish it. So yeah, people don't just think that the media is biased, people think that the media are malicious, that they actively lie, and they're right. One reason, if you're looking for a reason, is that the people who the media are supposed to scrutinize, the government, well, they pay off the media. It would be like coming up on a watchdog and giving him a nice steak. Yeah, the dog's going to be your friend. We don't call the media payoff a payoff. We call it a bailout or financial support or an investment, but it's obvious that the only media the government likes to give money to are those that the government describes as trustworthy. Because of course, I mean, they mean that the media that the government themselves can trust to do things like hide Trudeau's blackface photos, trust to do things like hunt down the man who dared to leak those photos. If you are the media that reports on the government and you take money from the government, like a watchdog taking a free steak from a burglar, it is reasonable that people will think you are compromised. It would be like a hockey referee taking payments from a team he's reffing. It's fair to believe that the ref is no longer independent and that if he makes a bad call, it's actually on purpose because he's being paid. That's our journalists, pretty basic. The fact that they're also all left-wing adds to it. That goes to bias, but the lying is quite something. So what does the CBC say about this? They who are the most compromised, they who are explicitly a state broadcaster who receive $1.5 billion a year from Trudeau, and they who are still actively suing the Conservative Party in Canada in court to this day. I'm serious. So here's a tweet from the CBC about all this. Canadian trust in journalism is wavering. Here's what CBC News is doing about it. And if you click that link, here's what you get. It's an editor's note from a guy named Rody Fenlon. Canadian trust in journalism is wavering. Here's what CBC News is doing about it. Recent survey found 49% of Canadians think journalists are purposely trying to mislead. Okay, I'm curious. What is the CBC going to do about this? Will they sever their financial ties to Trudeau? Of course not. Will they maybe change their political lineup, make it a little more balanced? I mean, their flagship panel is called At Issue, and it's hosted by Rosemary Barton. She was one of the original CBC journalists who sued the Conservative Party in the last election. And then there's Chantal Hebert, who is a Trudeau Foundation scholar. And then there's Althea Raj, who is Trudeau's official biographer. And then there's Andrew Coyne, whose cousin Susan Coyne was Pierre Trudeau's mistress and had a daughter by him. So yeah, this is probably a photo that could appear in a dictionary next to words like incestuous or nepotistic. Forget about the fact that they're all from the Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal triangle and that they haven't had a new idea in decades. They are all in the tank for Trudeau, all on the Trudeau payroll in one way or another. So yeah, are they going to fix that to get the trust back? No, 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 no. You see, the problem isn't with them. The problem's with you. Now, I'm going to skip to the first part of this editor's note where he outlines the lack of trust as per the Edelman report. I already told you that the other day. Let me skip to their proposed solutions, or rather, who they blame. Who's to blame? Are we looking at the gasping canary in the coal mine of Canadian democracy? Plenty of blame has already been dished out for the growing distrust in news media. Some point to the elimination of the U.S. fairness doctrine in the late 1980s and the rise of shock talk radio, then the splintering of audiences on cable TV, then the internet and later social media and algorithmic filter bubbles that tend to reinforce one's own worldview. Hang on, it's 2021, I checked, and the CBC thinks that one of the reasons people don't trust the CBC, people in Canada, remember that this was a Canadian survey, the CBC thinks the reason Canadians don't trust it in 2021, when the CBC takes $1.5 billion from Trudeau, and they have all Trudeau panels about Trudeau, and they cover up his blackface and his groping scandals and the sexual assault of Rose Knight in Creston, BC. The reason for this distrust is because some radio stations in the United States in the 1980s had some shock jocks. Yeah, denial isn't just a river in Egypt, I guess. Say, by the way, does Canada even have a shock jock? Like even one? Or even just a conservative that's allowed to be on the radio anymore? Can you name one? And if you could, is that why people don't trust the CBC in 2021? What a laugh. And of course, there's Donald Trump. I'm reading, this is actually their next excuse. There's Donald Trump, the former U.S. I'm laughing. They don't even know what they sound like. The former U.S. president's persistent efforts to repeatedly delegitimize mainstream press as the enemy of the people and fake news shaped and hardened public attitudes. Got it. So people in Canada don't trust the CBC because of Donald Trump. Now that's an Escher drawing if ever there was one. The CBC hates Donald Trump. We know that, just like Trudeau does. The CBC blames Trump for everything. Now, he's been gone as president for over a month. He lost the election in November. But the CBC still can't stop grousing about him. It's an example of their bias. And in many cases, their misinformation. They were huge promoters of the conspiracy theory that Trump was a Russian spy, completely debunked by the Mueller inquiry. The CBC believes every anti-Trump conspiracy. They say that Canadians don't trust them, the CBC, because of that bloody Donald Trump. He's to blame for everything. It's like in the book 1984, oh, Goldstein, he did that again. Oh, the reason why the wheat harvest is down, it's that Goldstein. They blame him for everything. The fact that they are saying that shows that they have Trump derangement syndrome, which is one reason people don't trust them. They still have TDS. They don't even realize that their explanation for why people don't trust them is proof of why people can't trust them. I wonder if they try that when they get pulled over for speeding. Officer, I get it. You say I was speeding, but it's that Donald Trump. And get this, I'll read some more. As trust has eroded, journalists have found themselves increasingly targeted and harassed. The growing perils of doing journalism in the U.S. were explored in this excellent panel discussion hosted last week by the CBC's Adrienne Arsenault on behalf of the Canadian Journalists for Free Expression. It's worth a watch. And yes, we are seeing increased harassment of Canadian journalists in the field. Hey, hang on. Can you name a single Canadian journalist who has been harassed, assaulted, hit? A single one in Canada? I can. Sheila Gunn-Reid. David Menzies, Kian Bexley, our cameraman Mocha, and Lincoln, and Efren, and others at the Rebel. But I cannot name a single other journalist in Canada who has been attacked in a decade, in decades. Can you? The CBC doesn't have to hire bodyguards to go out there like we do. The CBC isn't assaulted either by Antifa or the cops like we are. How on earth could any of that explain why people hate the CBC other than, look, they're lying even now? Like with their other excuses, it actually, ironically, explains the reason people don't trust the CBC. The ridiculousness of their explanations, that's the explanation itself. The fact that they are so unaware of who they are and how crazy they sound to normal people, the fact that they are blaming Trump and U.S. talk radio and mythical people attacking CBC journalists that never happened, that actually does tell us quite a lot about why no one trusts them, doesn't it? And how they will truly never fix the problem, because in their mind, the problem is you, or certainly anyone other than them. Okay, so if they're not to blame for the fact that people hate them, if they're not to blame for the fact that people think they're liars, if everyone else is to blame, well, how do they propose to solve that problem? Well, it starts by attacking their enemies list, which is basically a list of anyone that people trust more than they trust the CBC. Because if you believe in the CBC's conspiracy theory, they are hated unfairly. They are the victim. Everyone else is to blame, from 80s talk radio in America to Donald Trump. So obviously their solutions to fix this problem would involve fixing other people, getting other people to change, not the CBC. Are you crazy? Let me read. What CBC is doing to rebuild trust in journalism. Oh, this is going to be good. As Canada's public broadcaster, no. You're the state broadcaster, it's different, but let me get back. As Canada's public broadcaster, the CBC has taken a very active role on the trusted journalism file. Here's what we are doing to try to earn and keep your trust in these skeptical times, while also battling the growing scourge of disinformation. All right, so they're going to battle disinformation and untrustworthy people, but only disinformation and untrustworthy people outside of the CBC. They will not fix their own untrustworthiness. But hang on, they acknowledge that half the country hates them. And yet the only untrustworthiness they will tackle is found in others, and they think this will make people trust them more. I'll read some more. CBC News is a member of the Journalism Trust Initiative. So you know it's good, because it's called the Journalism Trust Initiative. An effort to establish globally recognized standards of trustworthiness in news. Okay, so you think you'll be trustworthy if you just work on changing the definition of trustworthy. So you don't actually have to change what you do, other than just to try and change the definition of trustworthy, to bend it until you can say, yeah, that's us. CBC Radio Canada has been a member of the Trusted News Initiative. Oh, you got another one, Trusted News. That sounds really trustworthy. Since its inception in 2019, the TNI brings together global news organizations and tech platforms to combat disinformation. It created a real-time early warning system to flag serious disinformation that may pose a threat to life or the integrity of the electoral process. Okay, same thing. You know that we see you, right? You know that we see that so far you are not addressing any of your own problems. You're talking now about the integrity of electoral processes or some weird thing about saving lives around the world. I don't know. But what does it have to do with the fact that no one trusts you? Half the people hate you, think you actively lie. Why do you think anyone cares about what you have to think about global elections in some faraway place, other than maybe if you've got some weird Trump fetish again? Seriously, have you seen anything yet on this list that would make you change your mind from these CBC boys are liars to, I was wrong, these CBC boys aren't liars? In fact, are you sort of detecting the opposite? They're trying to shift the blame and point fingers at literally anyone else for anything else. I'll read some more. CBC Radio Canada has joined with the BBC, that's another state broadcaster, the New York Times, that's owned by Mexico's richest man, and Microsoft in support of an effort to develop Project Origin, an open standard for confirming the authenticity of content from trusted sources to fight deep fake video news generated by artificial intelligence. This is a new application of established technology to digitally verify the authenticity of our news content when it appears on other online platforms. Got it. So again, they're going to scrutinize other people, not themselves. Now, we talked with Alan Bokhari about this the other day. This is Microsoft's program to track down who wrote some political criticism, some tweet, some meme, to track it down to the individual person. It's about ending privacy for political critics and political dissidents. They would love this in Hong Kong. That's explicitly what this project is. Again, it has nothing to do with the CBC lying to you or spinning you. It has everything to do with the CBC attacking its competitors. And by that I mean any critic, anyone who mocks the CBC, anyone who disagrees with it. And I note all the state broadcasters who really want to hunt down people who are doing unauthorized journalism. Again, so far, have you seen anything about the CBC's own untrustworthiness yet? I mean, we're pretty deep into this editor's note, and so far he really isn't talking about any of his own problems, is he? They sure want to talk about how much everyone else is lying, but boy, they're just perfect themselves. I'll keep going. CBC News is part of the Trust Project. Well, that's got to be like the fourth organization with the word trust in it, so you know it's true. An international partnership with tech and media companies to increase transparency and accuracy in online news. CBC policies on transparent labels, corrections, bylines, and links to our JSP on our digital pages have become a model for other partners in the project. Okay, so they will label corrections and bylines on their own stories. Okay. I'm not quite sure that's enough to make people think you're not lying all the time. Like, take this story, just to pull one out of the air. PM health officials warn Canadians against believing COVID-19 internment camps disinformation. Disinformation campaign falsely suggests Canadians will be forcibly sent to quarantine sites. Really? Canadians will not be forced into COVID-19 internment or containment camps, a spokesperson for Health Minister Patty Hajdu said Thursday, taking aim at a disinformation campaign that has been circulating on social media for weeks. Oh, that's the worst, those social media types. The claim that the federal government is preparing to forcibly intern Canadians is patently false, the spokesperson said. You're not allowed to know who the spokesperson is, but that's for us to know, not you. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but as you now know, it's a lie. Like, this is one of those wicked lies that people hate the CBC for. Or at the very least, they promoted the Liberal government's lies credulously. As we here at Rebel News have meticulously documented for months, from the Yukon to Winnipeg to all across the country, there have been government quarantine centers around the country. And yes, they are forcing healthy, innocent people into them at great cost. You arrive at the airport in Canada from a foreign country, straight to the internment for you, even if you're a Canadian citizen, completely healthy and innocent of everything. No trial, no hearing. If that story by the CBC is not an outright lie, it's certainly propaganda and disinformation, and it's been proved false. And yet, I checked, no corrections. I thought they just said they're really good about their corrections. So yeah, they've got the byline of the CBC propagandist who wrote the original fake story, and they have a button you can click to report an error, but to this day, I just checked, that story has been up on their website since October. The CBC is propagandizing lies on behalf of their government paymasters. But sure, other media need to catch up to the CBC's trustworthiness. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of the self-serving blather to you. I promise you, it's more of the same. Never do they grapple with the news peg here. Half of Canadians think they're liars. Nowhere do they even accept that they're the problem, let alone offer a solution. Let me read how this ends. These worthy initiatives notwithstanding, the audience's trust will ultimately be won or lost on the day-to-day work of our journalists. That begins with an approach to news coverage that is open-minded, fair, and genuinely curious. Oh, no one's more curious than the CBC reporter. It means challenging our assumptions, testing every fact, avoiding errors and admitting them quickly and transparently when they occur. It means listening to understand. Does every Canadian we serve believe we will give them and the stories they care about a fair shake? Until the answer is yes, there's more work to be done. As always, I trust you will let me know what else we can be doing to earn and keep your trust. Hey, do you think the CBC is open-minded? If you're Christian or pro-life or pro-Trump or pro-firearms or anti-Trudeau, do you think the CBC respects you and listens to you and represents you and earns your trust? If you're a lockdown skeptic, do you think they care about you? Do you think they reported about the pastor in prison in Edmonton in the same way they would have done if it were, let's say, an imam from a Muslim mosque in prison, or let's say if it was Stephen Harper who put him in prison for something? Do you think the CBC's coverage of liberal cry bullies in Parliament who get mean tweets from right-wingers, that's a staple of CBC journalism these days, do you think that's the same way they cover conservatives who were abused by leftists? Does the CBC cover Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence in the same way they cover peaceful lockdown protests? Do you think they cover Republicans as lovingly as Democrats? Could they possibly be more in love with China? None of this is even on their radar. In fact, their response is more fuel to distrust them. They live in an alternative reality. I'd even say it's tantamount to a conspiracy theory, certainly disinformation, fake news. The CBC mindset, as expressed in this editor's note, it's incredible. It's really incredible to look at the world through their eyes. They think somehow that their inherent leftist pro-Trudeau bias is not why people distrust them, and they think that if anyone is lying, especially about those quarantine facilities, it's you. They think the whole reason why people don't trust them and like them, they think it's unfair. They think it was done to them by some cosmic evil forces like Trump and the late Rush Limbaugh in the 1980s. They don't list a single thing they're doing wrong. They don't have a single prescription to fix their own mess. They're signing up for 3 or 4 clubs that have the word trust in them. Yeah, and here's the delusion. I think they actually believe their own spin. I think the CBC actually believes they're the honest ones, that they're the ones telling the truth, even about the quarantine detention facilities. Yeah, no surprise the CBC had a flagship radio show called Q, because they are the ones deep, deep, deep into their own bizarre cult, aren't they? That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.